This podcast and every other podcast on my channel is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon. They get content early, completely ad-free, and extra content. Mostly, they are the reason that I am able to support so many shows with so many cool people and chat to more and more game developers. So if you want to support this kind of content, please check out the Patreon. The link is in the description. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Video Game Writing 101. Today, I am joined by Thomas and Lewis. Thomas, who are you and what do you do?
So, my name is Thomas Gerbaud, and I'm the world director on Dying Light 2. Well, that's been released a couple of months ago now, and I'm still working at Techland on something I can't really talk about, but which, let's say, is the continuation of what I've done on Dying Light 2.
Cool. Lewis, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Lewis Manalo. My title is Senior Narrative Lore Master.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. It's impressive sounding.
Cool.
Still trying to figure out what it means. But I'm at Sharkmob in Malmö, Sweden. I mostly work on what unannounced project, but I also did a little bit of writing work actually on Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt, which comes out later this month.
Yes, congratulations. I worked with somebody who wrote on that. I'm very excited for it to come out. So let me start with you, Thomas, and I'm going to be very interested, I think, to see how much your jobs differ, because you both technically, like at my studio, would be on the narrative design team in theory. But I imagine you do very different things. So Thomas, what exactly is your job?
Oh, that's a hard one. That's the hardest one. I always have trouble defining the job.
Well, would you define yourself as being a part of the narrative team?
No, because we have a narrative director. His name is Pearce. So he's the one who's really directing the narrative. My job is really to be the one who obsesses about the world. So it's like a lot of it is driven by the narrative. So it's a lot about what you hear the people say in the world. But it encompasses kind of everything. And the funny thing is, when I started at Techland, people were coming to ask me basically all sorts of questions about level design, about art, about all kinds of stuff, because world director, it's kind of like, okay, it's the world. So it's kind of a bit of everything. But really, like, if I had to define it, it's more like acting like as glue between the different directors. So narrative. So
you work with a lot of different departments.
I work with a lot of people. I work with a lot of direction. But let's say I'm more like a narrative flavor in me, because that's where I come from. And actually, Lewis and I worked on Ghost Recon Wildlands when we first worked together. I was senior narrative designer on this team. So this is where I come from. Story and crafting story is kind of what really moves me and what really makes me tick. And the thing is, like, for me, it's like a good story. If you don't believe in the characters, then you can't buy the plot. You can't believe the plot. So it's kind of the same for the world. Like, you have to believe in the characters that inhabits this world to believe in the world that they're in. So it means, like, you have to find out, you have to, like, figure out their stories and believe in their stories and this is when you believe in the world. So for me, that's one of the main job, is like, how do we give life to the people that inhabit this world? Like, yeah, that's a world that's nice. There's principles, post-apocalyptic. It's this city and everything. But, like, what are the human stories that are behind it? And for me, it's what I really I think was kind of lacking when I arrived at Techland, and I try to put a lot of energy in that. Is like, I want these little stories, I want these little details, I want to because this is what makes me believe in the world, basically.
Did you also have a hand in crafting the parts of the world in Dying Light 2 that are like, how the street level is more barren, full of zombies, and then the rooftops are often more lush and there are humans living up there? Like, is that something that comes from your role, or is that like a level design?
Yeah, so that's where it's tricky. But this was like something that they had early on, even before I arrived. That this idea that like, rooftop is hope and the street level is death. It was like a very clear visual principle and organization principle for the world that really worked well. So that predated my arrival, let's say. But I built on that. Obviously, like, of course, the people are going to live on the rooftop, so that's where they're going to build their life. That's where the stories are going to happen, and we have some structures, and that's something that I pushed, was in the same idea to say, like, I want to feel life. I want to feel these people are alive. So one of the things I pushed and I led was the abundant structures. So we have structures basically when you arrive in the city, they're kind of ruins. And you, as a player, get a chance to restore these structures to make it simple. And they're on the rooftops. And the way we tackled this was to say, like, what if we had to rebuild the civilization on the rooftop, what would we start with? And it's basically going to like Maslow pyramid, where we're like, okay, we need shelter, and then you need the higher levels of the pyramid towards love and self-expression. So this putting life on the rooftops, to make it for a short answer, was one of the things I did. But this was a principle that they had before, and that was visual, that was story, that was gameplay even.
You just expanded on it to give it more life.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. So Lewis, same original question to you. Like, what exactly is your job? How would you describe what you do?
Okay, so right now, because it's a new IP. Yeah. So basically, the lore master's job normally is to write sort of like the background of the world and character biographies and stuff like that. So that's definitely like a big part of it. That's kind of, sorry, it's not, because again, like, since it's unannounced, I don't want to like give away too much.
Totally, absolutely, no pressure.
Yeah, but I like this kind of early stage of a game, of an IP. Basically, it's definitely a lot of collaboration. So like every day we're talking with like concept art, we're talking with level designers and other things. But basically, like with every new IP, what you do is you need to write the rules of your world. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the stage that we're at now with all the different teams, like especially also, of course, with game design, sort of defining all the different things that can happen in our world, like who the player character is, and all of these different things like that.
I mean, to be honest, Lewis, that sounds even by itself very difficult. Like, as somebody who is working on a franchise that has, 12 entries or whatever, like God of War's been gone for a long time. Things change so much that sometimes it can be hard to track things. I feel like working on a new IP must be very challenging, especially if you're the person expected to keep it consistent.
Well, again, it's not just me.
Yeah, so, true.
Like, there's like the IP director and narrative director, Martin Holberg's there, and then also the other lore master, Jimmy Williamson. So like, it's kind of, what's interesting about it for us is because it's all new. Like, basically, we need to also organize it all as well. Whereas if we were working on Vampire the Masquerade, like that stuff, there's like literally like 20 books. It goes back to like the early mid 90s, that franchise. And then of course there's all the fandom that comes with Vampire the Masquerade as well. So like even like I wrote like one quest in Vampire in Blood Hunt. And even just that, like trying to keep track of all the rules of like what's already been established. And then I was always like asking like the main writers of it. So what would the fans actually like? What I mean? So there's things like that. So,
but your job right now, if I can ask, like, what are you doing like tomorrow? Like, again, dancing around.
It's holiday weekend.
Yeah,
here.
You don't get time off for Easter in the US.
Yeah, I know. But we have off till like Tuesday.
You get that in Australia too. This country's so religious. I'm infuriated. So you're taking tomorrow off.
Well, you're in California, so that's the difference.
Basically,
right
like a permanent party.
Like in Texas, you'd have like the week off, right?
Maybe, I don't know. But it's not the fact that it's not a public holiday. Anyway, I'm very upset about it. Obviously.
Yeah.
So on Tuesday, probably, what are you doing?
Again, like I can't like say too much stuff, but like at this point, like I'm wearing a lot of hats. So obviously my background is much more from the script writing side in games anyway. So, like when I was working with Tomas, a writer on Wildlands, and then became lead writer on Ghost Recon Breakpoint. So that's I'm always kind of tackling the new or any project basically kind of from that angle. So sort of looking at what the needs are from like the writing workflow and things like that. So because, like I'm basically already have like scoped out what kind of writing work needs to be done, even if, we're not really like writing scripts yet at this point, you know what I mean? I'm still sort of saying like where things are.
Yeah.
So right now, I suppose, Lewis, you're at a point where it's mostly like writing the backstory, the Bible, kind of like character bios.
Yeah, at this point, basically, we've approved, like a lot of that stuff is basically like going to approval. You know what I mean? So obviously rewrites are going to be coming and things like that. But then there's still, like kind of, you write all the backstory and bios and stuff, and you have to see where it hits the road in terms of level design and game design and stuff. So,
and then you send it off to an artist and you get art back and you see it's the coolest thing ever. And then you get a new idea and everything changes.
It's not always like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not always.
Very often. Yeah. It depends on where it is. So like at some other studios, like, well, not some other studios, but in many studios, like it starts with the art, you know what I mean? Like at where you're at, they probably started with the drawing of Kratos before they decided what they were going to do.
Kratos originally had a different name. There were loads of things that like originally were very, very different. I wish I could remember what it was. It's like Damascus or something like that. That they ended up changing to Kratos, which I feel like was probably a good call. Definitely went through a lot of changes in any case. But yes, that makes sense. Thomas, compared to like, I'm working on, I think there are 9 games in the God of War series. Lewis is working on a new IP. You're working on or have worked on a sequel, but it's also a different character.
Yeah, and yeah.
Well, I was going to say you also joined the project slightly later in. So, like, what do you like try to think about when you're crafting a world for a sequel specifically? Obviously, everyone says in marketing bigger and better, but like if we're talking about the actual dev perspective, like what is the goal, or did you think about it, or did you just try to make something new and fresh?
I mean, to be honest, like the project had been in development for quite a while. So when I arrived, there was a lot of like ideas everywhere, and there was a lot of documents, and there was a lot of content on a lot of servers. And I suppose that's kind of a classic. But then they still had like a few, like some very clear principle for the IP. The day and night cycle, that stuff I talked about before, which is this breakdown between street level, which is death, and the rooftop that is hope. And they also had this modern dark age idea, which was pretty powerful and driving a lot of choices. But to be honest, one of the first thing I did when I arrived was kind of like to soak in all the content, because you're talking about God of War being 9 different SKU.
I was reading for a long time.
Yeah, so
when I joined.
so same for me, and I wasn't familiar with the franchise. I briefly played Dying Light, but it's kind of like before joining the company that I really got into it, and it was a really good surprise. But the first thing was like getting acquainted with like everything was around, and then the thing is like it was also at this point my role, because we were like 1 year before Gold basically, so it was also working with my boss, the CCO, to make choices basically, because at this point a lot of it's like a tree and there's all these branches and they're all looking nice and they all have flowers, but some are dead and you're not really sure which ones. And so you're like, okay, we should cut this branch, and we should make sure that we have like one timeline, for example, like one backstory of the world that wasn't there, or like one backstory of the Night Runners, who are kind of like the let's say the secret order that you join or not actually in the main game. And so a lot of it was about, if I'm just talking about just the game, just Dying Light 2, just the sequel itself, was trying to sort out what was still valid, what was still going to make it to the game, and just like have one canon version. And actually it's one of the first thing, I mean, it took me 3 months 3.5 months, but one of the third thing I came out I came up with was this world Bible. So it's basically this like over 100 pages document that is like, all right, so this is the fantasy, this is the world, this is the themes that we are tackling in this game, and then this is everything about how the world is structured. Like this is the backstory, this is the events that happened, this is what the city Vildor is and was before the fall, and what happened in between. It's kind of like it was like almost an archivist job.
Yeah.
For some of it, like a crossover between being archivist and like creative, creatively bring this IP into. All right, there's one truth, and this is it, and nothing else, and this is not valid anymore. This is the canon thing, and this helped basically all the teams focus and make sure. That's what described when you asked me, what do you do? Well, there's not one short answer except like being the glue between all the directions.
To be fair, nobody I've had on the show that I've asked a similar question to has ever had a succinct answer. Nobody said, I write. Everyone's like media, a lot of departments. Like it is, I think, so much more varied than maybe the public.
I'm writing some stuff on papers all the time. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, one of the ways that I think about it, which is especially now since it's like a lot of it is also like IP building, is that the narrative is at the beginning of the game, but it's also at the end. You know what I mean? So like, you're right, like Tomas doing, you're creating the world and everything and all the rules. And then, I mean, it really is like how the workflow goes. So then, like you said, then, okay, there's art, then there's missions, and then there's, gameplay and stuff. I mean, often gameplay's, very much involved at the beginning as well, of course. But then like you're also there at the very end when you're writing the dialogue, which is with the actors and things. And then very often you're also involved in the marketing as well. Yeah. And then like based off of audience responses and what you had planned, you also decide where the franchise goes. You don't decide, but it's a narrative topic where the story goes next, so.
Yeah. But so a lot of it is like also giving everyone a set of constraints, creative constraints, not like in a negative way, but
helpful ones for sure.
It's like the play field. It's like this is where we're playing, and this is what we want to achieve, and it's like the prism through which everyone is going to do their job afterwards. So. Very long answer again, sorry. But
no, thorough is good.
This is what I started doing, and this was my first thing working on 992. And then if we're talking about the franchise and where Techland wanted to take the franchise, I think that there were some stuff that they were definitely sure. Like for example, the parkour experience. So it's like really the core of it's what makes this game tick, like it's where you reach the flow is when you are parkouring on the rooftop and chaining the different moves and stuff. So that was something that they knew was like they had struck gold, and that this is the thing that they wanted to expand. So one of the core pillar of the second one was natural movement and expanding this experience. And what goes with that is you have on one side, you have the gameplay, the movement, the 3 C's, what happens when you have the pad in hand. And on the other hand, you have the playground. So the one of the strong first driver to create this game was we need an amazing playground just for fun, for play, that is going to fit that, and that's going to, for which you're going to be able to basically have fun with this story of the parkour. So that was the stuff that was an initial constraint. And then obviously like having a deeper world, having a playground that is not only fun, but also makes sense, that also has different layers of complexity. It's something I'm very personally like super attached to, like this breadcrumb things, like, you have several layers to this world. You have the obvious, you have what the quest givers are telling you, you have what you see on the wall, literally. And then you have a second layer that is more like, once you play a little bit, you understand the organization, you understand the dynamics in this world of the factions or some big events. And then if you really scratch the surface really deep, then you have this third layer, which is going to be details, which is going to be stuff that you hear in collectibles, which is going to be stuff that you hear when you eavesdrop on some of the NPCs there, and which will which will give you like the last part if you're obsessed about this game, if you're obsessed about a game, which will give you the last like pieces of the puzzles. So I really love this kind of stuff. Like
very important, and it's an interesting one to talk about, because I feel like a lot of people, like general public, probably don't even know that your job exists, but it's something that is so important to giving players a cohesive world. And I wanted to ask, like, Lewis obviously touched on caring about what fans think in terms of like vampires. Did you watch streams when Dying Light 2 came out? Did you watch people play it to see their reaction to, all those pieces that were put together?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like it's the first thing that you do. I mean, of course, like you've been there, so like you first thing, you Google frantically and F5, 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 but you also like kind of like check the stream, check the main streamers, you check the fans. You also like I had specific stuff that I was proud of, like these campfire storytellers, just little scenes that happen in the open world, and you don't have to do, you don't have to participate in them, but just like they're just little stories that you hear. And there's a lady singing, and for me they were a moment of poetry in this world, because chaotic world, and you have this contrast, and I was like super, for me it was like this, it's something from the heart, and like seeing the reaction of some of the players. Lots of players were like, what is this, like where do I get to slash zombies in these things? And you're like, all right. But some people really liked it, and some people were like, like, I appreciate that you put this extra touch to give life to the world, like I was saying before. It's like
I put a lot of thought into that opening area in Dying Light 2 where they've clearly had the party.
Yeah.
And you see that people are just like dead holding their drinks. Like even that, I was like, oh, wow. Like, what was this person doing? Like even something like that you see really early on, like I ended up being like, oh, this is, wow, these people kill themselves. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Folks at Techland are really talented at coming together with these little stories that you can read in the environment. And like big kudos to the environment artist, art director Kasia Ternacka, and to all the other artists, because they're really great at that. So
it's something that like there was a Twitter thread from one of the artists on Halo Infinite who spoke about how he was placing specific kind of scenes to like, oh, we want this to look like combat training, and like, oh, maybe this is like these people, got murdered. It's stuff that's not necessary, but that somebody really enjoys doing. It's such a cool touch to a world for sure. So, Lewis, I'm assuming your answer is the same, but do you watch streams and YouTube videos of things when they're released?
No, sure. Like, well, for something that Toma and I shared was in the reaction to Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is like, for a lot of people, it's just like, okay, I'm going to go shoot things, drive around and blow stuff up. But then there are like, some real like dedicated fans who like really dug deep into the lore. And that's what I liked about what you can do with the medium, is that like you can actually get like very deep in the narrative if for the players that want it. But you just, but if the players,
you can't opt in with other creative mediums, really. Like you can't opt in with a movie. You've just got to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, like kind of. I mean, it's also, just like how much you want to read into the thing as well. What you know what I mean? So True. It's kind of, it's still like a very cool, like Marshall McLuhan cool kind of medium as well. You know what I mean? Where like,
I wonder if there's anybody who exists in game dev who doesn't watch YouTube videos or streams or whatever. Like when the God of War Ragnarok trailer came out, I was watching them for like a day. Just watching people react and like seeing some people cry. And it was the people who knew the names of all the characters was what got me. It was like the people who were like, oh, this character. And you're like, man, you're really into this. That's awesome. It's very cool.
And Bloodhunt as well, because we had early access late last year. So there were definitely like people who were really into it. Yeah. And there were also people who were like kind of new to the franchise who were just discovering it as well. So that's also cool to see too,
Yeah, it's super cool. So I'm going to pivot away from both of your actual jobs now into like a question that I like asking people is, I guess you can answer it either way. Are there games that you think have done your job incredibly well, like games that you find to be particularly inspiring? Or then the second part would be like, what would the direction would you like to see the industry head in? What are things that you would like to see more of, or things that I guess generally really inspire you? Sorry, I did not prepare you for this question in advance.
Go ahead, Toma.
Okay, thank you. No,
yeah, for me, it's Dying Light 2. Obviously,
obviously. It's just because I got you free. Oh, I didn't actually. Oops, sorry.
I'm one of the code.
No, but for your first question, I have. For me and my Polish co-workers are going to be proud of me, because I would say Witcher 3 is probably the game that impressed me the most in terms of building the world. And the reason for that is one of the things that we were talking on before, at least to me. I mean, I'm sure we'll have plenty of comment that people have different opinion, but for me, what struck me about this game is the consistency of its world. You know, like it's got a few themes that it taps in, like the fatherhood, you know, the war, and this kind of thing, and you consistently have like different ways to look at a problem, or to look at this topic of fatherhood, for example, which is something like you have the Red Baron quest that's talking about, you know, the child that is this monster, and of course the story of Ciri and Geralt is about father not being a father, being a father, and what I loved about this world is that everywhere, if you search the world, you will find something that resonates in one way or another with one of the themes, and it's just like, for me, like the way I see it is like a tapestry. It's like tapestry of Bayeux, you know, like this thing, like this fresco that has all these little pieces that come together. And after 50 hours or 250 hours, like me, then you drop the pad, and you're gonna remember this thing. You know, you're gonna remember some of the moments because they make sense with your overall experience. So it's I don't know how they, you know, like we have some people from former CD Projekt people, so maybe I should ask them. But you know, for me, I have a feeling that there was this really strong, vision that they all kind of like knew how to tap in it, and also from a production standpoint or from a game making standpoint. The thing is, like, you don't only want to have a vision as a director, as a world director, as a creative director. The idea is also how do you empower people to bring their own, you know, brick to the wall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Which means, like, what would be your take of talking about the world in talking about the war, or talking about fatherhood in a world like The Witcher, as an artist, as a sound designer, as a gameplay programmer? And I think they made an amazing job as that. And of course, the writing and the stories in Witcher 3 are, you know, one of the best in class. So that also helps, you know, believe in the world, believe in the stories of the people.
One of the best games ever made. I strongly agree.
Yeah. So short answer, Witcher 3.
It's a good answer. Lewis, how about you?
So I kind of keep going back to two different games. Well, if it's a game, like, yeah, there are two different games that are actually similar in ways but people don't ever think of them that way. And the first one is Mafia 3. And even though, like, whatever, like, criticisms people have of it, very often people criticize the gameplay and stuff, but I feel like the way that it tackles character and politics, you know, especially the race politics at the time and history, it's actually like very, you know, deep, and it took a lot of risks with a lot of the stuff that it was doing. You know, like one of your like main, like, the friendly NPCs is like a Black Panther. You know what I mean? And then
I haven't played it. I really should. Like, let me.
Yeah. No, and then there's also because there is also kind of and this is sort of how, and in certain ways, it's actually similar to Breath of the Wild, which is kind of a strange kind of comparison.
Didn't see that coming. Go on.
Yeah, but you know, like,
you got to explain now, Louis.
Yeah, so like in Breath of the Wild, you have like a lot of choice, and everything's really player driven. You know what I mean? And I love, like, if you want to talk about where narrative needs to go, that's where I feel it needs to go. But like, so for example, in Breath of the Wild, you can go to your 3 different, like, big robot bosses before you go to the main boss. You know what I mean? So you have these sort of choices. The world reacts to that. But then also the same thing happens in Mafia 3. It's just that because there are different territories you can choose to take over, and you choose which one you take over first. And then depending on like how you play these things out, like there are different like branches that happen in that one as well. So like so that's, like, so they're basically like, and obviously like Dying Light 2 has this too, where like, you decide, like who gets the water, like shit like that, you know what I mean? So like these kind of choices that change, where the player has an effect on the world that's also fed back to the player. You know what I mean? Like this is the kind of thing this is where story needs to go. So where it's the player is basically like they're writing their own story. They're kind of co-writing their own story. You know what I mean? In this world that all the developers have made. So. I
would assume that you agree with that, Thomas. If we're talking about the direction we want to see narrative heading.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the tech itself is quite impressive. Like that's one of the this choice and consequences thing is like there's really this ability to in Dying Light 2 and in the engine, the C engine, there's this ability to have like basically different versions of the world that will be what you experience as a player with your choices. So yeah, I agree. It's a tricky thing because the thing is like you want choices to be meaningful and you don't want it to be like an ever expanding, like an infinite tree of choices of things that don't really matter. Like for me, ironically, there's also one thing is like one other thing I like the authored approach as well. I like the fact that this Witcher 3, for example, is built with this intention, and that it makes me feel something because they've put the everything to create this emotion in me. So this is where I'm like in between, like the choice is yes, but if they are meaningful and if they really bring something as a player that is like a different experience from what you, Lewis, if you made different choice you experience, or you, Alanah, if you made different choice that you experience. So yeah,
it's just that it's difficult. Like this is a thing that seemingly everyone I've spoken to has agreed on, and I feel very strongly about it too, which is like the idea of video games really taking advantage of being video games rather than being more like movies, and figuring out the tech that makes that easier. But I think that it probably is more difficult than the general public thinks that it is to make branching narratives.
Hard. Do it.
No, for sure. But I think a lot of the response is like, why didn't you just do this? It's like, well, I mean, could either of you shine some light on what makes that more complicated than people think?
I mean, like it's simply because it's exponential. If as soon as you start to have like a couple of choices or 3 choices or 4 choices that you can make, then it just becomes like this, like I said, this infinite tree of possibilities of different scenarios, different situations. And just in terms of content, it's a hell. So you have to make content converge at some point. You have to make these choices converge, at least in the current approach. And another approach could be to say like you change the rules, so you change some parameters in the way the game is playing with your choices, which then becomes something that is a little easier to tackle because you're not necessarily creating new content or new characters or new dialogues or new that kind of stuff, but you are basically adding a modifier that is, an easy example is like if you have this idea of trust with a character, so when you talk to him, he's going to have like different way of answering you that are based on your trust level. So that's something that you can kind of like modulate and even through let's say software. But as soon as we're talking about content creation and like custom dialogues, custom scenes, custom assets, then it's a hell for production. These choices.
So yeah, what Thomas is saying, I think a lot of it is also the approach to narrative is still very linear.
Yeah,
at most studios. So even a branching narrative is a linear narrative. It has a beginning and it has an end, or maybe it has several ends, but it's still very linear, whereas like if you look at a game like Minecraft, that is narrative. It's just that it doesn't have like as many voice lines as other things, you know what I mean? But the proof is like kids are addicted to Minecraft novels. You know what I mean? Like even
I didn't even know those existed.
No, Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z, he even writes them.
Really?
You know what I mean?
No way.
Oh my gosh,
Wow.
yeah. So it's yeah. So yeah, son of Mel Brooks is writing Minecraft novels
because
that's like that's how much players are invested in these narratives that they write themselves.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So there are basically all these different rules have been set up by, Mojang or whomever. And then the players, they write their own stories in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Breath of the Wild, like you were saying, it's a kind of similar thing. You're writing your own stories. And I think even The Witcher 3 does do that to an extent where you remember it because of the hand that you had in it, where you were emotionally at the time, what you were feeling that day. Then it becomes a thing that lives with you forever, kind of, which is a beautiful thing about video games.
I mean, the cheapest stories are the stories the player tells himself in his head, and that's like a book, and for me, and it's also the one I remember the most. And it's the one that maybe because of our job, I guess we're more sensitive to that, or more sensitive to that. But it's the best stories. It's the one where you're not told everything, you're not shown everything, but you create the stories out of some, like you were saying, environment storytelling. Like you make the story. Oh my God, these guys were training. Oh, they died, or they did something.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, for my last question, because we did have to start late, I won't keep you guys too much longer. Just pivoting, very different direction here.
Lots of pivoting today, Alanah.
I gotta get all my bases covered.
Yeah, lots of pivoting.
This is the hardest of the pivots. For anyone who would be interested in doing what you do for a living, what advice do you have? How do people
just don't do it? No, it's like seriously, like do not do it. It's like no, because it's like one of the most it's like a heartbreaking thing that you don't, it's like being in a romance with somebody who you hate, you know what I mean?
You can never switch off. That's the thing that I always think about is like the jobs that my family have, and then they go home and then they don't think about work. Never.
But you meant to do this, Alanah. It's the same for me. Sometimes I wish I was an accountant, and I don't have to worry about, at night about, oh my God, what's going to happen to the scene? What's going to happen with this guy? But you love it.
Oh yeah, I do. I like that it consumes me, even if I think sometimes it would be nice to not watch a movie and go, interesting.
Yeah. It's horrible, right? Because you're like, oh, please stop seeing this.
Yes, everything all the time. Other video games too.
Right.
But Lewis, if I have to make you answer the question.
Yeah. No, like seriously. So like I feel like, I mean, obviously there are other like things. So if you're doing the actual writing thing, then it has to be, there would probably be two things. It would be like read books, like read everything books, but then also like do your research, So I don't know, Tamad, you feel about that? But
I mean, so I love what I do. Sorry, but I mean, I love what I do. But the thing is, like, it's we briefly talked about it with Lewis before, and I think is like, for me, writing as a whole, it's not specific to a video game. It's one of the best advice I've had, and I think it was in a Truby book. Like, not everything's great about Truby, but this was for me good advice. Was to say, write something that changes your life, and it sounds like a bullshit marketing thing, but it's true actually. And the reason why for me it's something that works is that, let's face it, like most of the projects, movies, books, even games are not gonna end, or it's gonna take a long time, or you're not gonna finish it. So for me, if you write something that in itself, the topic or the thing that you write about is something that that you want in your life, that will change you as a person, as a professional, as a creative, as just as an individual, then you've earned something, you've won something out of this experience. And like I told you, I wrote a couple of books, and the second one was never published. So, like failure. But at the same time, at the same time, I wrote about, and the topic of the book forced me to like dig into some stuff that really like kind of like are still with me today, as a person, So I think write something that changes your life, because then it's also your life. It's also your life. And it's what you were saying just before by saying, like, I wish I was an accountant sometimes. Or maybe I said that, but
you did. But it was the sentiment came from me.
Season,
yes. Yes. I was just putting an image to it. And sorry for all the accountants out there.
My mom is an accountant.
My brother is an accountant.
There you go. So, it's close to home.
Yeah. So anyway, so if it changes your life, it also becomes your life. So it's going to make you happy, even if your job is crap, even if your work is crap, even if you don't make it, if there are moments when you are like deep down in this hole of like, oh, this is shit, like am I just a failure? Then at least you've learned something, and you can hang on to that thing because you know it matters for you. And yeah,
kind of to go off on tangential to that. So I did Colin McCann says something really similar, where he's like, don't write about what you know, write about what you want to know. So that's another
yeah.
Look at it as well.
Also interesting.
Well, that bridges both.
I wrote a book about very cliche, but about an AI. And that advice did not work out great for me because I ended up studying for a year, and it just really delayed the writing process. Like, it just made it very difficult to write anything because I was like, technically this is inaccurate. Like, just have to learn a lot about AI. I interviewed people. That is still not finished. But I know a lot about AI now. So
yeah. So I guess like that kind of bridges the gap between both our things, where like the research part is also like super important stuff, and kind of like writing about something that changes your life or that you want to know.
I like both of the inputs you had. But how do people get employed with those inputs? They want to work in video games. What's the next step?
Don't do it. No, but,
all right. So we got a troll out there. So.
No, but if I want to be like clear about so most people who want to write for video games, they don't actually. Well, I think what they actually want to do is work in like marketing for video games. Actually, to be completely honest, or because once you get into marketing, like most people I know who are working like purely in IP, and they have like the people who have like IP something in their title, they come from marketing and in a lot of, and at least in AAA or something, you know what I mean? So I think, if you really want to sort of like make like really like, big decisions in terms of storytelling, sure, do that. But if you do want to, if you want to write clever lines or something, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about.
I mean, I very much think that make sure you know what you want to do is a very good piece of advice, because of the amount of people that I've met in the 10 years that I've been in or around this industry is a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want to write, but they don't. They don't like writing. They just think that writing is the easiest way to get into something. And there are definitely people who do love writing, but I always want to be like, would you want to be a writer if it had nothing to do with video games? If not, figure out the thing that you are passionate about and figure out where that fits in the industry, because there are so many jobs, so many positions that can do so many things. Like if you actually really like design, you can even work in a design for a website in terms of marketing. Like you could start there, but a lot of people try to sandwich themselves into writing because they think that's the way to go, despite having no interest in writing otherwise. So it's definitely like know where you can fit in the industry rather than trying to fit yourself in where you don't fit necessarily. I think you'll be happier in general. It's like just figure out two passions and shove them into video games.
I mean, honestly, I'm often sort of like you're saying, people come up to you. I'm often a little bit wary of people who say, well, I want to write, because you can just start writing. You know what I mean? There's nothing to stop you.
Yeah, I had several screenplays and short stories and things that I had to submit that I didn't have to scramble to put together for my submission because I've been writing them for 10 years.
So that was gonna be my advice is if you want to be a writer, then write. And that's the thing. Like all the masters, Stephen King in his books and everything, they say like if you want to write, you have to write every day. It's like of course, like you can be a genius and have inspiration, but if you don't sit in front of your computer and type some words, then nothing's going to happen. And yeah, a lot of the time, the words and the sentences is going to be shit. But, you know, if you don't sit in front of this computer and if you don't write, then nothing will be anything. No shit, no nothing.
Yeah,
so
you got to get the
think
shit out of the way.
Shit's better than nothing.
So then the good stuff comes after all the shit. So
and I think, you know, like I started in this industry not on the creative side. I started on the production side. Actually, I'm an engineer by training, so nothing to do with writing. That's
a brag in France, though, right?
Isn't it anywhere? Yeah. But anyway, so and the fact that I've was writing stuff on my private time, and I was writing, you know, because I've always done that, and it's always been something that's been with me. Then when the opportunity came that, you know, there was this kind of like spot or this opportunity to jump in and go on a more creative position, which happened for me 9 years ago.
It's a big difference.
Then I sort of had the credentials, and it's not like even I'm working for it, because it's something that I wanted to do. So my best advice is, if you want to be a writer, start writing some stuff. If you want to be a designer, start designing some stuff. If you want to be a gameplay programmer, a level designer, you know, open Unreal, open Unity, everyone can access it, and start doing some stuff, even if it's shit, you know, like that shit will, you know, become less shitty with time. You know, look at
Profound.
look at Celeste, and I forgot the name of the guy, but
look it up.
The guy
Celeste is incredible.
Yes, also the name of my daughter.
Nice. Maddie Thornton wrote Celeste, and Noel Berry was also a programmer.
Yeah. So this guy has been making like 30 games, and he started when he was like 15. And of course, the 21st games were kind of shit, but then, you know, masterpieces. So
it was made in 4 days during a game jam.
What was
Celeste?
Was it?
At least that would have been initially. Yeah. I imagine the concept came from that.
Yeah, the prototype.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I also wrote my book. In 2 days. Yeah, no bragging.
Really?
No.
Oh, I was like,
bragging 5 years, man. 5 fucking years of my life.
That makes sense. Now, writing books is hard. I have a weird thing with publishing where I think I need to get over it eventually, but I've written plenty of books. I don't care about publishing them. And I don't know why, but I have this weird thing where I'm like, I don't care. I wrote them. I send them to my family and I let some friends read them, but I don't care about anyone else reading them. And I know that I shouldn't think that way.
I think that's fine.
I just don't care.
Honestly, no, because if you think about, so like the original novel, like Tale of Genji, was just, she wrote it for her friends.
Yeah.
And we're like, just wrote it for all these other courtiers. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's perfectly fine.
Just, it feels weird. People are always like, when are you going to publish something? And I'm like, when I care about going through the effort to do that and find art and find a published date and figure out where it's going, like, I don't want to do any of that. So I'm just like, what if I just don't?
That's the thing. No, I think people are getting away from like the whole purpose of the thing. Like, first cave paintings weren't made for mass audience. They weren't made for people to see at all.
Just ended up that way.
You know, you made it with a dark ass cave.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So it just I feel like I'm broken because I don't care, but I still don't.
No, it's great. It's great.
You're kind of stuck with the root of it, you know?
Yeah, I guess it's probably easier for me to finish things because I think there are probably some people who try to write things with the intention of publishing them. And then that's a difficult goal. Like, you need to have something emotionally driving you or whatever to actually complete a lot of stuff. And the goal of being published is probably one that leads to some hollow writing.
Just make sure after you die,
he can do it.
Just make sure after you die, someone will publish your stuff like they did for Emily,
Give my friends the
Emily
password.
Dickinson, and for Kafka. You know what I mean? Their friends are like, dude, my dead.
I'm gonna cash in on this now. Let's go. I'll let my friends do that when I'm gone. All right, thank you both so much for joining me today. This is super fun and very interesting, and you both do very different things to a lot of the other writers that I've spoken to, so extra interesting. Does anyone have any closing words? Anything else that they would like to add before we go?
Not really. Thank you. That was really fun. I love talking about stuff.
No, again, I think so it is difficult writing in games, or doing narrative in games, period. But the best part about it, as opposed to writing novels, is the collaboration part of it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the thing. So yes, I've published fiction as well, but it's like the collaboration that you can get, like, getting ideas from all these different people all the time. Like it's so much better. Honestly, I find it a lot more rewarding than, like publishing a novel or like a story or something.
Working with people who are way, way smarter than me and have these areas of expertise that I know absolutely nothing about is the coolest thing in the world. It feels like such a privilege that I'm like, this person is an expert on this thing they've been doing for 20 years. And I get to just ask them about it. And there's 600 of them. Like, it's so, so, so cool. It's like, I agree with you that it will take over your entire life. And it is very difficult in ways that I think I probably didn't even necessarily anticipate. In the year and a half I've been doing it now, it's definitely very hard, but it is super rewarding, very fun thing to do for a living and a fun thing to talk about, obviously. Could do it forever.
Yeah.
Is there anything anyone would like to plug, like something you're working on right now? Obviously, Lewis, you have a game you worked on just about to come out. What date does it come out?
It comes out. Shit, I'm gonna get it wrong. I think it's August 27th. Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt comes out. It really is a lot of fun, and there have been a lot of changes that made since early access that I think, for like old fogies like me who are not like the best battle royale players. So it's a free battle royale. So of course, like all the kids play it and they're awesome and they crush you. But we have some more features. Yeah, so there are more features now that make it more fun, I guess, for people who don't live, breathe, and eat
just this
battle royale. Yeah. So,
Thomas, how about you?
Dying Light has been out for 2 months now, and we're still, Techland's made this promise to support it for 5 years. So what I'm working on is part of that support plan. So working really cool new content. They just released patch 3, or will release it as something. But you can join anytime in Dying Light 2 and join the city. And I hope, beyond this amazing, parkour gameplay that is like always a blast, I also hope that you can pick up some of the little pieces of this world, of this lore that are dear to my heart. And if you do and like it, please hit me on Twitter or tell Alanah, because we love it as developers. People must know, like, we are not robots. We have emotions, and it's what we do it for. We do it for, players. We do it for people to tell us, what they think of a game. So, it matters.
Unlike our novels, which you just write to hide and just share with our friends.
Wow, I've been attacked.
We want everyone to enjoy.
Had to call me out.
So.
Anyway.
To be fair, the world I had said this in multiple videos, I think the world in Dying Light 2 is one of my absolute favorite things about it. I thought it was awesome. So
thanks, Alanah.
I loved it.
Thank you very much.
Where can people find you on Twitter? That will be my last question. If anyone wants to reach out and has any more questions.
So it's littlest Thomas.
How little are you?
Littlest. Fine.
Average size.
Yeah. It's like I'm part of these people who got Twitter a long time ago and got like a stupid name.
And you're stuck with now,
and I have it, and no, it's like my corporate or whatever.
Lewis, how about you? Where can people find you? You don't have to share if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't have Twitter, and
bless you. Save yourself.
I'll see what Elon Musk does with it, and then maybe I'll join.
The first person to say that. The whole of Twitter is like, I don't want this right now. It's wild. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Banned anyway.
Well, you're basically banned right now. Thank you both so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.